When people talk about Souls-likes, they usually mention the same games. Lies of P, Hollow Knight, maybe even Cuphead, but there's one game that nobody seems to talk about, and I think it is the most underrated Souls game of all time. Yes, I'm not exaggerating, I genuinely do think that. And it's a game where you play as a crow whose job is to literally reap souls. Yeah, I know, sounds pretty weird. I've loved this game for years, but despite that, I've never actually gone for every achievement, so I decided to change that. My goal was simple. Get every achievement in Death's Door. The problem? One of those achievements requires beating the entire game using nothing but an umbrella as your main weapon. And I decided to make a video about it because I think this game doesn't get the love it deserves. So, without further ado, let's jump in. Now, technically, I had already beaten the game before, but that was just a casual playthrough, and I pretty much only got like the main story achievements, and this time I wanted everything 100%. So basically, for a quick overview of the story so you guys can actually understand what's going on, you play as a crow who works for a company that collects souls of the dead, and during a routine assignment, a giant soul is stolen from you, forcing you to chase it across the world and collect 3 even larger souls to get it back. A giant soul is basically just a boss that you kill, and bosses give you giant souls. Alright, so here's the hub world where you'll be spending a lot of your time, the Hall of Doors. It's basically just a bunch of doors connecting you to everywhere in the game. The first main boss was the demonic forest spirit, which is just like this giant flower creature that's trapped in the middle of the woods. Compared to later bosses in the game, it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward, but it serves as a good introduction to the game's combat system. Next up was the Urn Witch, who was like this really old grandma who used urns to make magic and extend her life beyond natural. The Urn Witch also had a special achievement called Hot Pot, where I had to shoot my fire magic ability into her urn hat to set her on fire. And this was pretty easy. It took me like 2 attempts to get it right because you kind of have to aim into her pot and it can kind of be awkward, but it was pretty easy. Next up was the Frog King boss fight, and he had another boss-specific achievement called Meal for a King, where I had to shoot a bomb into his mouth when he was trying to suck the platforms I was standing on in so I would fall off. It's a small gimmick, but it kind of, makes the game a little more fun because you can't just autopilot through every boss fight in the game, makes it a bit more interesting. For my third and final giant soul, I had to fight Betty, which was like this ancient snow beast monster, and she was probably the hardest out of the 3 bosses so far, simply just because of how fast she would move, and also because of this stupid move where she would just swing her arm behind you and you would like no time to react. But other than that, she was pretty easy for the first run, but later in the video she becomes a much bigger obstacle for a harder achievement. Once you collect all 3 of the giant souls, you can then fight the final boss of the game, which is the Lord of Doors, who is supposed to be running your whole operation, but you actually find out he's a bad guy. The final boss was pretty easy. You have a few running sections and a few fighting sections, and then you end up fighting him for the final time inside the Hall of Doors, and then you kill him. It's pretty easy, pretty simple stuff. Then after beating the game, I thought I was like almost done with all the side content, considering how easy and small like the main story was. It was still fun, don't get me wrong, but it was really short. And I was totally wrong. This game actually has a lot of side content left. Now, there are a few miscellaneous achievements that you need to get, but I don't really feel like those need to be mentioned that much, separately, because they're pretty easy and they pretty much just require you to talk to NPCs and, get certain dialogue interactions. So if you see that there's a few achievements that I missed or just didn't talk about, that's why, because I just think that there are other achievements that are more difficult and deserve to be talked about in greater detail than the miscellaneous ones. Alright, with that out of the way, the first achievement I got in the post-game was to find these 16 shrines that upgrade your amount of health and the amount of magic uses you can have. Some were basically impossible to miss, while others were like, I have no idea how you can find that without a guide. I mean, tucked away behind like the most hidden paths imaginable, and it was just like, I don't know, dude. Next, I upgraded my 4 magic abilities, which requires you to beat 4 different bosses for 4 different achievements, and the bosses were kind of hard, not too bad, but, gave me a little bit of trouble, but overall, we got it done without too much of an issue. Next, I went for probably the most grindy achievement in the game, which was to find all life seeds and collect them and plant them. So what a life seed is basically a little seed you can find throughout the world, and you can plant it in a green pot and it heals you. There are 50 seeds and 50 pots, one pot for each seed. The seeds are scattered throughout the entire world, so it took me a while, I'm not gonna lie. And this actually is required to unlock the true ending of the game, and to unlock the true ending, it is another achievement where you have to find 7 of these secret tablets to unlock a door, which just basically triggers a cutscene of the secret ending. Most of these tablets were pretty easy to get, except for, you know, the tablet where you have to find all 50 life seeds, but other than that, pretty easy, simple stuff, just required a bit of traveling around the world for different NPCs. And the last thing I had to do before getting the achievement for 100% completion was to find all 24 shiny things. What is a shiny thing? It's just this random item that you have to collect, and it's just another scavenger hunt type of achievement like the 50 seeds, where you kind of have to just sit there and grind for it, and there's 24 of them, so it wasn't as bad as the planting 50 seeds, but you know, it still took me about an hour to do, but after that it was well worth it to see that 100% achievement pop. By this point, I only had one achievement left before getting that sweet 24 out of 24 achievements for 100% completion, but that final achievement would be the hardest out of all of them. And this achievement is called Academy of Umbrellas, and I am required to beat the whole game only using the umbrella weapon. So that means if I even swing my sword once with any other weapon in the game, I am automatically done, and I have to reset that save file in order to get the achievement. And compared to the other weapons in the game, it does significantly less damage. It's basically just a troll weapon. That's literally all it is, which means every fight lasts like probably twice as long. And basic enemies that required even just 2 hits with other weapons now require 5 or more hits. And because of how ass this weapon is, the strategy is to basically spam upgrade magic so you can just shoot arrows at all the bosses and enemies, which is honestly a pretty good strategy. But in all the Souls games I played and Souls-likes, I am a very melee combat fighter. I don't really like to use magic, so this was going to be a hard one for me to basically only play with range stuff the whole game. Now for most of the run, things were going surprisingly well. The bosses and enemies took longer to kill, but they were still pretty manageable. And then I reached Betty. Betty is the 3rd giant soul boss who I mentioned before, and she is easily the most aggressive boss in the whole game. Throughout the fight, she constantly charges and rolls across the arena, slams into the ground, and sends snowballs flying at you in every direction. Normally, the fight is challenging but manageable, but since I'm playing with a literal twig, it was a completely different story. Eventually, I discovered a revolutionary strategy that all Souls-like and Soulsborne players use. Get good. Once I mastered this incredibly advanced technique, the fight became much more manageable. Instead of rushing for damage, I started playing patiently, waiting for safe openings and accepting that the fight was going to take forever. Several minutes later, Betty finally died. Bro, Betty was actually the Rage Bait final boss, bro. When I beat her, dude, I felt like anything was possible, dude. Like, this shit was actually crazy. This game is way too easy for a boss to be rage baiting me this much, but this was genuinely like nightmare fuel to do, bro. Like this was just so annoying. After that, I went on to beat the Lord of Doors and finally beat the game with this umbrella. Thank God. And just like that, it was over. 24 out of 24 achievements unlocked for Death's Door. After more than 8 hours of achievement hunting, countless collectibles, multiple boss fights, and an entire playthrough using nothing but an umbrella as my main weapon, Death's Door was finally 100% complete. Looking back, some achievements were definitely more enjoyable than others. Like, I don't think I'll miss searching for my 50 life seeds and pots again anytime soon. But the challenge also reminded me why I loved this game in the first place. And after spending so much time with it, I think there's only one question left to answer. Is Death's Door really the most underrated Souls-like? And honestly, I think the answer is yes. Death's Door manages to do something that very few games can. It's simple, the combat isn't overly complicated, but it's satisfying. The story isn't filled with endless lore, the world isn't massive, and yet somehow it all works. Every area feels distinct, and the bosses are all memorable. And the soundtrack, by the way, is amazing. This is one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a game in a long time. And the game constantly rewards you for exploring and paying attention. Even after already beating it once, I was still finding new secrets during this challenge. There aren't many games that can make a second playthrough feel that rewarding, and Death's Door is one of those games that does. And while I don't think every achievement was perfect, the journey to 100% completion gave me a much greater appreciation for just how much care went into every part of this game. So if you've never played Death's Door before, I highly recommend you give it a chance. But maybe skip that umbrella achievement though. Alright, with that all said and done, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.